Welcome to Assembly Calendar. I'm Mike Friesen, and with us for our program today, Assemblyman Steve Hawley. Steve Hawley represents the 139th Assembly District in New York State, an Assembly District that includes Monroe, Genesee, Orleans, and Niagara counties. We want to thank you folks all across that part of New York State for joining us for our program today. And Assemblyman Hawley, I think any astute viewer will see that we have a guest with us in the studio today, and I'll give you the opportunity to introduce that guest.
Well, I'd love to. Steve Aldstadt, he's here all the way from Western New York. How are you? Thanks for coming.
Steve.
Appreciate it. Your title and your reason for being here today is near and dear to my heart, and so many Western New Yorkers and hunters and fishermen. What are you doing? What are you doing hanging out here?
I'm recently been elected as president of S.C.O.P.E, that's Shooters Committee on Political Education, and we are here to talking to legislators such as yourself about some bills that affect gun owners and sportsmen in New York.
Beautiful. And you were down a couple of weeks ago, which you corrected me and said it was a couple of months ago. It was in January of this year, wasn't it?
Well, we've been down here several times so far this year, but we were here for the Sportsman's Rally on the 14th, and a few times before that as well, yes.
Very well attended. In S.C.O.P.E, again, you've told us what the letters stand for, but why don't you give us a 1 minute and 8 second roundup on what some of your goals are? It has to do with the Second Amendment, doesn't it?
Sure. What S.C.O.P.E is it's a membership organization. We're basically an educational organization, Shooters Committee on Political Education. And our mission is to educate people on the issues of the Second Amendment and gun rights, the public at large, educate our members as to what's going on with legislation and here in Albany, and as well working with legislators and educate them on our issues.
I'm going to guess, Mr. Aldstadt, that you've got somebody here who understands the issues that you're talking about. But do you find that when you come to Albany to talk to a legislature that consists of 212 individuals, many of them from downstate New York City to be precise, that maybe they don't understand what Second Amendment rights means to upstate sportsmen and recreationists, that sort of thing?
Yeah, there's a lot of preconceptions about guns and gun ownerships that people have that aren't really correct, or they don't really understand a lot about the functioning or even the legal ramifications of owning and carrying guns. So we have our work cut out for us, teaching people a little bit more about the subjects.
Enlightening might be a word that we could use there. You fellows both mentioned the event back in January in which sportsmen were invited to come as guests of New York State to the state capitol to do just that, sort of talk about outdoors activities, gun rights, all those different things that come with that. And nobody really knew. This was the first annual such Sportsman's Day here at the state capitol. Nobody really knew what to expect. Well, I think a lot of people were surprised. There were huge crowds that showed up here of sportsmen and outdoor recreationists who wanted to have that opportunity to talk to the legislature, to maybe lobby the governor's office about these important issues. Let's show just a minute or so about what that looked like. You'll see the huge amounts of people that showed up and get a real sense of some of the things that were discussed.
It's a message sportsmen and gun rights enthusiasts from across New York State want to hear.
The Assembly Republican Conference and other members of the legislature that believe in our Second Amendment rights and making sure that law-abiding citizens of this state do not have their rights taken away.
Among the proposals gun rights advocates are calling for, a Second Amendment for New York State.
Pistol license reciprocity with all 50 states. Protections for all firearm manufacturers within New York State.
Second Amendment supporters say the right to life and liberty predate the nation's founding.
The right to defend your life is the most fundamental right of all. It's not constitutional. It is, but it's also biblical. It's like water quenches your thirst. Food quenches your hunger. With a firearm, you can protect your family. You can protect your babies. You can protect yourself.
there's the message that was had, and as we were sitting here discussing this, Stephen Aldstadt, you told us that representatives of S.C.O.P.E were very much in attendance and having their presence known that day as well. It was quite a day, wasn't it?
It was quite a day. In fact, Ken Matheson, our previous president of S.C.O.P.E, was one of the featured speakers at the event. Yeah, we had people come from all across the state, busloads of people from all the way in western New York and in the southern tier, and people paid money, took time off from work, and came down here to make sure that the legislators understand some of their issues.
I think one of the things that made that significant, Steve Hawley, was that the sportsmen and the gun advocates oftentimes were kind of kept in the background here whenever they did come to Albany. Maybe not treated as some of the other lobbyists and advocates on other issues were. I think that day might have made a big difference.
Well, a year ago, it's a striking difference to a year ago when we had, from my district, we had about 40 people here, and they came down to exercise their right as citizens and lobby our elected officials at the state level. And we wanted them to be introduced as my neighbors, and we had a very, very difficult time. It took roughly 20 minutes of negotiating from the balcony to get people who believed in the right freedom of speech and to express their views to be introduced on the floor. We finally prevailed, and this year's gathering certainly showed a marked difference, and hopefully the people that had closed minds and ears and eyes before have had them opened a little bit, and maybe they'll think a little differently as they vote this year. We hope so.
One thing that's not different is that this week, as the legislature sits in session, the Assembly is scheduled to take up a number of proposed pieces of legislation having to do with gun control issues. I'm guessing, Mr. Aldstadt, that's one of the reasons you're here this week. Now, let's talk a little bit about that and the idea that I guess a lot of the proposals that come out of the majority in the Assembly, much of which comes from, again, the New York City area, as I mentioned before, a lot of these have to do with gun controls, or taking some of those rights that we heard discussed in that piece there, taking some of those gun rights away from New Yorkers.
Yeah, very much. And the point, our point on the majority of these bills is that very few, if any, of these bills address actual criminal behavior. They all tend to target law-abiding and peaceable citizens to make their rights more restricted and charge them more fees and make them jump through more hoops just to exercise their rights. And we support any legislation that targets criminal behavior. For example, there is a bill that would mandate a minimum 5-year sentence for committing a crime with a gun. Things like this, we're all in support of. We don't support criminals with guns. We support law-abiding, peaceable people.